case against socialism. You know, Bernie Sanders is no longer alone on the debate stage. It seems like we're hearing more and more about socialism. In fact, 43% of Americans think it's a good thing. You are on the complete other end of that. Tell us about this book.
Well, one of the things we learned in writing the book is a lot of people say, well, we're not for Stalin, we're not for Hitler, we're for Scandinavia. So as we were researching the book, we actually found that Bernie Sanders' form of socialism actually is unpopular, and he would never get elected to anything in Denmark. In fact, the Prime Minister of Denmark, when he heard Bernie was going around saying they were socialists, says, no, we're not socialists. We have private property, a stock exchange, we have low corporate income taxes, we don't have a minimum wage. And the big difference, and this is where the big lie comes from, Bernie says we're going to give you all this free stuff, but we're only going to tax the rich people. In Scandinavia, they tax the working class, 25% sales tax, and an income tax starting at $60,000 is 60%. So really the difference between their country and our country is they do have more free stuff in Scandinavia, but they pay for it with massive taxes on the working class and the middle class.
But we have massive taxes here, but we don't get any free stuff. We don't have free health care. Well, our public education system is a problem. It seems like the only people that get free stuff are the very, very wealthy.
We have a different form of taxation in our country. Ours is much more progressive. So we've taken the poor off of the rolls. They don't pay income tax anymore. Most people below $50,000 don't pay any income tax. The top 1% in our country pay 40%.
Our audience says that's not true.
Well, the IRS statistics say that the top 1% in our country pay 40% of the income tax, and that those making less than $50,000.
Donald Trump doesn't pay any income tax.
Let me ask you this, because I live in Miami. There's tens of thousands of Venezuelan exiles living there. You talk a lot about Venezuela in your new book. I get a lot of political ads from the Republican Party. Donald Trump has tweeted this. Many have tweeted this. If you vote for Democrats, they will turn the United States into Venezuela. Do you think that's a fair statement to make?
Well, if you vote for a socialist, you might get socialism.
Come on, don't do that. Maduro is not a socialist. He's a corrupt, murderous thug who is starving his people.
That's not true.
That's not true? Maduro's not a thug and a murderer who's starving his people.
Let's have a conversation here. Chavez was a socialist, and socialism was the economic system of Venezuela.
And they stole. It's a kleptocracy. It's not socialism.
But here's the question is, they voted for socialism. They voted for, let me finish.
No, I can't let you finish. If you're going to say Maduro's not a murderous thug, I'm not letting you finish. Because it's a damn lie. And I've got a bunch of neighbors and friends who know this. Don't do this to me. Don't mansplain.
Emergency room, you don't know what to say. You can barely talk. Your spouse has to be able to tell the doctor, please stop. In the emergency room, give them the monoclonal antibodies before they're admitted. Because once they're admitted, we won't treat them. It's the same way with symptoms. You have to have symptoms within the first 10 days. If you don't have symptoms, if you're on day 11, you won't get monoclonal antibodies. It's completely arbitrary, it's capricious, and it has to do with government-mandated guidelines. Let's take some of the other truths or mistruths that are out there. I've said over and over again cloth masks don't work, because they don't. Peer-reviewed studies have shown time and time again cloth masks don't work. But when Dr. Fauci tells you all masks work, when he comes in all draped with 3 masks on himself, with little insignias, clever insignias of different sports teams, he's actually spreading a mistruth that causes lives to be lost. Why? Let's say you have a 75-year-old woman, and she gets COVID, and her husband's taking care of her. Do you think the advice to go into the room to feed her, bathe her, help her get in and out of her clothes while she's sick, wearing a cloth mask is a good idea or a bad idea? It's malpractice. And yet, for some reason, the left-wing media has lauded this man as the second coming, and what he's telling you is absolutely verifiably dangerous to your health. The only mask that really works of any real value is the N95 mask. The surgical masks have some value, but not very much. Most of the air is going around the mask. They just aren't of value, but you have to submit. The man's telling you to do it. You got to do what you got to do. But the thing is when you tell people something's safe, they tend to react to that and have behavior. And in their behavior, they're in favor of something that may well actually be risky behavior for them. The vaccinations, because we ignore natural immunity, we directed the vaccine to the wrong people and still are. So, for example, because of Dr. Fauci's lead, India is accepting his lead as well. In India, there's not enough vaccine. They have 1 billion people. They can't vaccinate enough people fast enough. So if you have 1 billion people and you have 200 million doses of vaccine, who do you think you should give it to? Should you give it to the 10-year-old the same as the 85-year-old? No, that's ridiculous. But what about 2 65-year-olds, and one of them's had COVID and one of them hasn't? The studies are plentiful. The studies are throughout that say that if you've already had it, you have natural immunity to COVID, as good or better than the vaccine. Do you think it makes good public health policy to say that everybody that's 65 should get it, instead of saying, have you had it? Why don't we check you for antibodies if you think you've had it? Maybe you should wait until we've vaccinated every 65-year-old that doesn't have immunity. These are real things. These are real discussions. But if you have these, unless it's on the Senate floor, actually that's not even true. You can say this on the Senate floor and YouTube will take it down. I've had it happen. I've given speeches on the floor that YouTube takes down. So this is a world in which people need to realize and get back to the ideas of classical liberalism were that we debated things. Classical liberalism was about skepticism. It was about you having your opinion and me having my opinion. But the difference between the elitist or the collectivist point of view and the individual rights point of view is, I believe you have every right to your opinion. But if you're a collectivist and you believe that from the very top down, all medical decisions come from Dr. Fauci, and if he doesn't want you to fly, you don't get to fly, see, it's different from individual liberty, because I think if you have a differing opinion, you're welcome to your opinion. And if an airline has a policy I don't like, maybe I'd choose not to fly. But the idea that we're going to restrict everyone's behavior based on what they decide to do, what's next? People eat too many cheeseburgers, we're not going to give them a heart stent because we think they haven't behaved and they haven't listened to the doctors on what they should be eating. There is no end to this. But in the end, if we're not careful, we are going to spend this country into oblivion. COVID's a big cost of the extra spending we have now. But I can tell you, there are ramifications. They're coming quick. They're coming in the form of higher prices. But there is no reason in the world for us to default. We have plenty of money. We should simply pay for the interest based on what comes in every month. And with that, I'd like to reserve my time and turn it over.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Sure.
Senator Paul, when you and I were both elected to the Senate back in 2010, I remember the national debt was an issue then. It was becoming large enough that people were concerned about it. And as it mounted, sometimes we had conversations about how long it might continue, how long it might continue to spiral upward. You surprised to see that here we are 11 years later, 11 years after you and I arrived here, and where it's gone since then?
I guess surprise is not the word I would choose. I would say disappointed. You know, the Tea Party movement, we had 100,000 people on the mall out there. People were concerned about the debt. They were concerned about constitutional government. I remember you and I meeting for the first time and talking about how we needed to reverse some of these terrible precedents that had allowed government to grow large, and that the courts need to reform government as well as government be reformed from its elected officials. But yeah, we had a great debate that summer. In the summer of 2011, we said we wouldn't raise the debt ceiling without